Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and a lot of you may have seen that there is a new documentary coming out on the Oprah Winfrey Network, if I'm not mistaken, by Bill Duke, which a sequel to his wildly popular documentary Dark Girls. He's actually making a documentary called Light Girls, which exposes the struggles of being light-skinned in America. And so it was an interesting topic for me because there are some bloggers that on our team that had different opinions on the issue, and I respect all their opinions. And I thought, this is interesting. There are different perspectives, and I want to hear both of them so I can learn something. And so to talk about this, I brought in two writers for Your Black World that a lot of you may know about because they do so much amazing stuff, and hundreds of thousands of people have read their articles. And the first one is Nomalanga Mhlauli-Moses. She's the founder of HealthyBlackWoman.com, and also April V. Taylor, who's just one of the most amazing activists that I have seen in a very long time. She is the new Angela Davis. So I want to first of all ask. I guess I'll start with Noma. Noma, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Boyce. How are you?
Fine, fine. And April, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good, good. And I wish people could see you. I don't know what people are seeing on the recording because we're actually doing this experiment with multiple people on Skype, and for some reason your image wasn't coming through. But I wish people could actually see you in 3D in full motion because April has so much passion and energy that it's fun to hear her talk and discuss things because she doesn't talk about things without them being close to her heart and she pushes hard. But what I wanted to do today was just have a friendly discussion because each of you are on different sides of the fence when it comes to your thoughts about the documentary, whether it's necessary, whether there are real issues, or if people are just trying to make money. And so I guess I'll start with you, Noma. You wrote the first article I saw where you were basically saying, and people can read it on naturallymoi.com, you were basically saying that there is no need for this documentary, that it's just kind of a waste of time and they shouldn't do it. Can you talk about that?
Sure. You put me all the way on the other end of the spectrum, but I was more asking the question of, is it really necessary? And of course, I was leaning towards no, it's not necessary, but it was still in a question form. And I kind of, went through a few examples and I said, well, it's like, I'll just give you one where I say, we know that obesity is a problem. We know that people have prejudices against obese people. And if there was a documentary where obese people really talked about their struggles and their issues, would we really need thin people or slim people to then get their own documentary so they could talk about how hard it is to be slim? And maybe there is a struggle with being slim. I wouldn't know if there was. But I just tend to think that sometimes, even though there's struggles on both ends, it doesn't necessarily require us to investigate one because we investigated the other.
Okay, so you're kind of saying that every conversation doesn't have to be symmetric. Like,
Right.
when black people say that racism is an issue, you don't then turn around and do a documentary where white people are complaining about reverse racism.
Right.
It's just not the same thing. Okay, well, that's an interesting perspective. And so, April, you, excuse me, in case people can't see you, you might be, you might qualify as what they would call a light girl, right? And so I'm curious to hear what your perspective is on this because you kind of had a different point of view. You both respect each other and you're friends, so it's not any sort of contentious debate. But you were saying that there may be some issues with being lighter skinned that that people should talk about. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I think that it's important to realize that light-skinned people also experience things that may be emotionally painful or that may question their character or intelligence, and that's not to discredit the fact that there are studies that show that darker skinned people do suffer some kind of impact in terms of socioeconomic status and that kind of thing. There is data to show that there are measurable negative consequences for that relate to colorism and specifically to darker skinned people. But I think that it's important to realize that there is another side to the colorism issue, which is being light skinned, and I think that it does deserve a documentary because to only look at one side of it, I feel like doesn't capture the full conversation. And so I think to not allow that to be part of the conversation just really kind of does it a disservice, and maybe doesn't give people all of the information they would need for Black people as a community to really try to move past an issue that was really forced upon them through slavery. So I think it's important to realize that, light-skinned people, even though they may be able to pass, as some people look at it, that for me and my personal experiences, I don't get the same white privilege that people who are white get. And then I also feel like there are times when my Blackness is called into question. It's questioned whether or not I'm authentically Black. And so that can be painful and make me feel out of place. So I think it's important for everybody's experiences to be able to be discussed.
And it's interesting when you sent me your thoughts on that topic, it did hit me. I thought about it and I said, oh, you know what? There are challenges with being light, especially for someone like you, because you're not someone who wants to necessarily embrace some sort of privilege that comes with being a light girl, so to speak, right? Because being from the South, you live in Kentucky, where I'm from. The further south you go, it seems that light skin contains some sort of awkward premium. Historically, I remember hearing my grandparents and people in their generation talk about, how being close to white was so valuable. Historically, always has been, right? But you're not. If we were all on the plantation together, you wouldn't be the house Negro. You'd probably be the field Negro. You're an activist. You're out in the streets. You're shutting down traffic in Lexington, Kentucky. Even Cornel West noted the extraordinary work that you're doing down south. So you're right there in the mix. So I can imagine maybe someone looking at you and saying, "Well, wait a minute. Why? What do you have to complain about? Why are you fighting alongside us? You're not really one of us." I mean, do you ever go through that kind of thing in the middle of all your activism that you do?
Definitely. I've had people question whether or not I'm Black to begin with. I'm used to people kind of wondering what my ethnicity is and questioning me in regards to that. And it can be very frustrating, not necessarily to have to explain it or identify myself, but to feel like I continually, after, identifying, my ethnicity, to have to continue after that point to prove how Black I am. That definitely becomes a point of frustration. And I think the most frustration comes from people who seem to interact with me in a way that, because of my skin color, there will never be a point when I'm completely able to prove being Black enough to them.
That's really interesting. So, Noma, as you hear April's perspective, what goes through your mind? I mean, are you hearing some things that maybe make you reconsider, or what do you think?
Absolutely. What's funny is, my husband is African American, and and I'm from Botswana, so I'm African. And one of the things that we've run into a lot of times is when people will meet me for the first time and they've never seen a photo of me, they say, "Well, but you don't look African." And I will say, "Well, what does an African look like?" And of course, I do know exactly what they mean. They mean you're not dark enough. You're not very, very dark, because that's the image that they have in their mind of what an African should be. So I can definitely relate to what April is saying, where it seems like sometimes people will have one picture in their mind of what they believe something is. And if you don't fit, then you just have such a hard time proving to them that you have the same challenges as those people who do fit whatever they have in their mind of what what a Black person is or what an African is. So I can definitely relate. I think my point, going back to what I was saying, was I just felt like it's certainly everybody has a struggle, related to whatever they identify with or whatever their life experience is. I just felt that it didn't have to join the conversation about being a dark-skinned girl. I didn't think that was necessary.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder, for April, I want to ask you, so do you think that if you were not an activist, let's say just, leaning on stereotypes here, let's say that you you pledged AKA, because a lot of people have that, that stereotype, light skin, long hair. You pledged AKA. You lived in the midst of privilege. You didn't want to go shut down Main Street, for the sake of Mike Brown. You just wanted to go to the mall and and just sort of be part of some sort of privileged group. Do you think that your light skin would flip from being a liability to being an asset? I mean, what does that experience kind of look like for you? Do you think that the kind of person you are is part of what creates the struggle, mainly because the group that you identify with the most, it maybe has a harder time sort of accepting you right away as one of them? I mean, is that something you experience, or what do you think?
I think it would depend on the circumstances as to whether or not it would be more of a more positive thing versus a negative thing. I know that with my family, even before I was an activist as a child, that there were people in my family, specifically cousins, like peers, who would question. It was kind of this feeling like they felt like because I was lighter than them, I automatically felt like I was better than them. And so that was frustrating because there's this, it's almost like this, you have to be overly self-aware so that people don't have any room to take the way you interact with them as being condescending or conceited or rude. And for me, that's particularly difficult because I feel like I'm a very humble person. So to have to walk on eggshells to try to make sure that, especially with family, that something that you say or do isn't taken the wrong way, it can just make those relationships stressful, more stressful than they should be.
Hmm. Well, it does seem. I mean, if you really look at the just the whole premise behind the Girls documentary, my impression and from what I've seen in life is that it seems that there's sort of this idea that especially among girls, not boys have the issue as well to a point, but not quite the same way. That among girls, when you are dark, it's kind of like you're treated, especially in the deep South, as kind of like you're on this lower rung of humanity, right? You're just you're obviously not as pretty in the minds of some people. You're deserving of some sort of harsh treatment isn't that isn't inflicted upon the cute light skinned girl, right? I think that there is with white supremacy this perception that, oh, the cute sweet little light skinned girl is the one, oh, she if she gets a job, she doesn't work in the back washing dishes, she's out front, working as a hostess. She doesn't go to school and make bad grades, she goes to school and makes good grades. She doesn't become a prostitute, she gets married, and becomes the princess, right? And I wonder if and it seems to me that that's kind of what might offend or really upset dark, so many of the beautiful dark skinned women that exist in Black America. And so, Noma, I want to ask you this: as a person who grew up in Botswana, did you notice any sort of premium that came with being lighter skinned in your home country?
Of course. Just as much as, even though slavery is long over in in modern day America, or at least we like to think so, we still have the remnant of colonialism where you kind of had to deal with white settlers coming into your country and then they are in charge. And then they decide what's good and what's bad. And I often joke that to this day, when a person is speaking in my native language and they want to say, I'm very sophisticated, it loosely translates to saying, I'm very white. Or if you're doing something, if you're talking well, you're talking white. Everything good is associated with being white. So the closer you are to being white, people do have that feeling that yes, you're somehow better, or you think you're better, or something. So that certainly exists, and I'm not denying that it exists. I, to some degree, have had the privilege of not really fitting either of. I'm not extremely light skinned, and I'm not extremely dark skinned. So I really never had either of those battles. But I would certainly say it exists.
Well, April, I want to ask you about something. I saw a study today on Financial Juneteenth where basically they literally said, are you all able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I heard a noise disappear and I wanted to make sure my audio didn't go away. They basically said in the study that There is a difference in perception, not just light versus dark skin, but also if you were classified as either black or African American. They did a study and they basically presented two people. Now they did this with men, but I think it would apply to women. And they had the same credentials, same everything, same description, but they described one person as black, the other one as African American, and they asked them to predict what do you think the education level is of this person? Do you think they possibly have a criminal record? What's their income level? And for the person classified as African American, they predicted a higher income level, a higher education level, no criminal record. Right? They saw this whole unique imagery for the African American that they didn't see for the person who was defined to be black. Do you think that connects to the colorism issue as well? Like if you were to ask them, well, predict what the person looks like. Do you think that they would predict the black person to be darker than the African American? What do you think?
Definitely. I think it's tied to the colorism debate. I think that black is seen more as, I would, in my mind, black is seen as less assimilated. And so African American is, okay, here's this black person who's assimilated to the idea of what white America thinks that they should be. And so I think that does play into the psychological presentation of colorism. And I think that wanting the the light girls documentary to be part of the conversation isn't necessarily to say that that dark skinned people don't experience more negative impacts from colorism, but to say, okay, in order to have a complete conversation about how this impacts all of us as black people, then this is definitely a component. This is definitely the other side to the coin.
So
So to
April,
speak.
April, this is my last question for you. So,
Uh-huh.
um, you know, let's assume that you wanted to assimilate. Let's assume that you wanted to, become the next Barack Obama, and you wanted white people to love you. Do you think that in that particular context that light skin becomes a complete asset as opposed to a liability? I mean, do you think that maybe the struggle of being a light girl, a lot of it hinges on trying to break into the group that you most identify with, because you're not you're not an uppity kind of woman. You are a you're a nuts and bolts kind of person that really gets out there and believes in the struggle and fights for the community. And so,
Right.
do you think that your version of colorism that you experience is more hinged upon the kind of person you are as opposed to? And I know I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to just ask that
Right.
again, just so I can be clear on that. So, do you think that the kind of person you are is what really creates the bulk of the colorism you might experience, whereas it may not exist at all if you were simply seeking to assimilate, get a corporate job, and just sort of fit in with white America? What do you think?
I do think that it would change the way it feels on my end. I think that if assimilation into white culture was more, I guess, what I wanted, then I definitely think that it would work to my advantage. But because I want to be able to embrace my blackness and be proud of it and not have it questioned, and because I want to be accepted as a valid part of black culture, it does become more of a liability. But I do think that yes, if I chose to assimilate more into the box that society would like most people to fit in terms of climbing the corporate ladder and possibly being involved in politics and not so much trying to change the existing system, then yes, I do think it would be more of an asset than a liability.
Your volume.
Sorry about that. I've learned so much from this conversation, and just so you guys know, and so the audience knows, we keep it real. I just saw that the mailman got here, and he's going to deliver my package from Amazon in 30 seconds, and I'm going to have to go downstairs. He's going to call my phone pretty soon. So I'm trying not to be rude, and I'm trying to do this in one take. So I hope you all will excuse my abrupt ending, but I want to say thank you both very, very much, and I want everybody to go check out Nomalanga's work. She writes for HealthyBlackWoman.com as well as Your Black World. She's actually the founder of Healthy Black Woman. And April V. Taylor, she's always on CultureCritic.com, and she also writes for Your Black World. And these are just two outstanding people who are bringing great ideas to the table. And I hope that you'll respect all points of view and not just feel like you have to pick a side. Thank you, ladies, very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, and everybody, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. Until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.